Okay. This is the Historic Preservation Board meeting of September 6, 2023. Diane, could you do a roll call, please?
Jim Chard.
Here.
Kristen Finn absent. John Brewer.
Here.
John Miller.
Here.
Ivan Heredia.
Here.
Peter Dwyer.
Here.
Chris Cabezas.
Here.
Okay, and if it's okay with you guys, I would like to move the approval of the agenda up and election of the officers down one. So if somebody would make that motion to approving the amended agenda.
Yeah, I'd like to move the agenda be approved, moving 4 up to 3. And that is the only change.
Perfect.
Second.
Great. And Diane, could you call the roll, please?
Jim Chard.
Yes.
Kristen Finn absent. John Brewer.
Yes.
John Miller.
Yes.
Ivan Heredia.
Yes.
Peter Dwyer.
Yes.
Chris Cabezas.
Yes.
Okay, and the reason I'm kind of speaking to start this out is because we have an election of the officers tonight. So because we made our new appointments now, so we've got a full board, and the first one we would do would be the chair, then we'll do a vice chair and a second vice chair. So the way it'll work is basically if you have somebody in mind, you just make a motion to make this person chair, and then somebody seconds it. I'll see if there's any discussion, and if not, we'll go ahead and do a roll call. So if we want to start out, does anybody have a motion for somebody to be chair?
I'd like to move to make Jim Chard chair.
I was going to move to make you chair.
I beat you to it.
Okay. Well, let's do a second for John's, and then we'll see if there's any discussion. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Is there a discussion? Okay. Can we do a roll call then?
Jim Chard.
Do I have to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Kristen Finn absent. John Brewer.
Yes.
John Miller.
Yes.
Ivan Heredia.
Yes.
Peter Dwyer.
Yes.
Chris Cabezas.
Yes.
Okay. And do we have a nomination for first vice chair?
I'll nominate John Miller for first vice chair.
Second.
Okay. And can we get a roll call, or is there any discussion? Okay. Can we go ahead and get a roll call, please?
Jim Chard.
Yes.
Kristen Finn absent. John Brewer.
Yes.
John Miller.
Yes.
Ivan Heredia.
Yes.
Peter Dwyer.
Yes.
Chris Cabezas.
Yes.
Okay. And do we have a nomination for second vice chair?
I'm going to nominate Chris Cabezas for second vice chair.
Second.
Okay. And do we have any discussion? Okay. Let's go ahead and have a roll call, please, Diane.
Jim Chard.
Yes.
Kristen Finn absent. John Brewer.
Yes.
John Miller.
Yes.
Ivan Heredia.
Yes.
Peter Dwyer.
Yes.
Chris Cabezas.
Yes.
I'm sorry I didn't grab the gavel to pass it to you, but I'm figuratively passing it to
Got
you.
it.
And then
Do I need to move?
I think you'll actually
You have to
switch
move.
with Peter.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now you can go ahead and take the lead on the rest of the meeting. If you need any help, I'm here.
Probably will.
He's been down this road before.
You've got it, though.
And your communicator.
Oh, yes. Okay, I think the next step is approval of agenda.
We actually had moved that one up, so it's going to be
We had to do that.
minutes.
I thought, okay, all right, sorry.
problem.
Next step is approval of minutes. We have 2 drafts, April 19th and May 3rd. We can probably just group those together.
As long as there are no changes, you're welcome
Okay.
to put them together.
Is there any discussion or changes? No? Okay. I'll entertain a motion for approval of the two draft minutes.
Second?
I got to make a motion.
Yeah.
I'll move. I'll move approval of the minutes of April 19th, 2023 and May 3rd, 2023 as written.
Second.
There you go.
Any discussion? Diane, could you call the roll?
Jim Chard,
Yes.
Kristen Finn is absent, John Brewer,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Ivan Heredia,
Yes.
Peter Dwyer,
Yes.
Chris Cabezas.
Yes.
Okay, I think we are up to swearing in of the public. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak on any item on the agenda? All right.
You guys.
Then we do have the swearing in.
Please raise your right hand. Please raise your right hand. By the authority vested in me, the notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, next is the swearing or comments from the public. Since there is no public here, I think we can probably skip that one pretty quickly, unless staff wants to say anything. Okay, presentation. We have a presentation tonight. Actually, this is technically we don't have a presentation, right? Okay, so we have no presentations tonight. We do have one quasi-judicial hearing, and I think I need to read this off.
Yes, please.
Okay. This hearing shall be conducted in accordance with the City of Delray Beach quasi-judicial rules. The applicant and the city shall be permitted to present their case. The public shall be allowed to speak for 3 minutes each, or a maximum of 6 minutes if the person represents an organization, members, staff, and the applicant may be allowed to cross-examine a witness. The city or the applicant will be allowed to offer rebuttal testimony. The decision to approve or deny any application or appeal may not legally be made upon the personal views as to whether a project is a good project or not, nor may a decision be made based on the numbers of citizens who support or oppose a particular project. The law requires that all decisions must be made on the basis of whether the project meets the requirements of law, the comprehensive plan, and the land development regulations. I guess then the next step is the presentation. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Who is going to present that this evening?
Okay, for the record, I'm Katharina Palavoda, Historic Preservation Planner. Not supposed to do that. Okay, one second. Oh, come on. Wait, I'm trying to find slideshow.
Top there, yeah.
Oh, there it is. I was in the wrong. Thank you. This works. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I would like to enter file 2023-242 into the record. It's a Class 2 site plan and certificate of appropriateness for 80 Depot Avenue, the Seaboard Airline Railway Station.
Are you giving the full presentation, or is Missy going to go first and then?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe Missy's going to go first.
Okay. While Missy comes up, do you want to ask if there's any ex parte communications from the board?
Yes, I do.
Great. Thank you.
Any exportation?
I need a mouse
Pete?
pad.
No.
No?
None.
Nope.
Oh, I think it's...
Nope.
No.
And none from me.
You know what? That's easier. I should have done that. Okay.
That's all right. Good evening, Misty Barletto, Director of Public Works for the City of Delray Beach. I have with me my project team, Kevin Matthews, who's the project manager for the revitalization of the Delray Beach Seaboard Airline Railway Station, and Assistant Public Works Director, Cynthia Buisson. So the reason that we're here today is that construction is ongoing and completion of the renovations to the train depot, as we call it affectionately, is anticipated by February of 2024. The insurance company for the city is actually managing the construction project, as you may know. I know there are new members of the board, so the train depot was actually a victim of arson in 2019, and the insurance company is helping us to reconstruct the train depot. Once it is completed, the city's wellness center will be moving into one part of the building, and the back part of the building that was originally warehouse space will be used for city offices. So since this construction project has begun, construction costs have ballooned, as they have on many different types of construction due to COVID, material delays, difficulty in getting construction staff, and that sort of thing. So we find ourselves in a position where we need to reduce the amount of money that we are spending on this project. One of the places that we have identified that we can reduce the cost of this project is to reduce the amount of landscaping that had originally been proposed and brought to this board and approved by meeting the minimum standards for the city. So the revised landscape plan does meet all city ordinances. It's not as over the top as what we had originally hoped to provide. So this is a site plan of the approved plan. It shows most of the bigger red circles there are different numbers of trees and shrubs that were in there. This is the revised plan. You can see that there is a reduction in the number of trees and shrubbery that we'll be putting on this property site. This is the plant list that we're now proposing to bring forward. We'll be reducing some of the more expensive tree species like gumbo limbo, and we'll be replacing those with pink shower trees and with silver buttonwood trees on the property site. We're removing the palm trees that have been planned for the site. And we're going to include, for ground covers, we're including cocoa plum, white fountain grass, and kunti, which is a native Florida plant. That is the extent of why we're here this evening. If you have any questions for us, we're happy to answer.
Staff?
Thank you, Missy. Okay, so once again, this is 80 Depot Avenue. The structure on site, it's known as the Seaboard. It's known as the Seaboard Airline Rail Station. It was designed and by the renowned architect Gustav A. Moss, and it was constructed in 1927. Here you can see the location. It's on the northwest of the intersection of Interstate 95 and West Atlantic Avenue. The property was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1986 and was on the added to the local register of historic places in 1988. Okay, so here's the original structure, built in 1927. It is a Mediterranean Revival architecture style. A lot of you may or may not know, but there are a series of different cities that actually have the same real train station. So we have a duplicate version that's in West Palm, Miami. There's one in Boynton, West Palm, and then Naples. So it's one of the reasons why the structure is on the National Register for historic significance. There are so many different versions. Okay, so back in 2020, the original structure did catch fire. Let's see. And then I know we have some new board members. Just for reference, so the structure did catch fire in February 25th of 2020, and the restoration and the reconstruction request came to the board September 1st of 2021 and was approved along with landscaping, new parking areas, and then other related site improvements. As Missy did mention, due to unforeseen costs on site, they're coming back with the request to, there is a reduction of landscaping. Okay, so here we have just some images of the fire, just for references of the structure. This request does not contain any type of additional request or changes or alterations for the structure. It is specifically for landscape purposes only. Okay, so we have some post-fire pictures. And then this is the rendering of what was approved for the site, for the structure. And then here's some existing structures of what it looks like on site now. You can see that, majority of the structure has been reconstructed, and they're coming in to fix the landscaping. Okay, so this was the approved site plan. And then the next image kind of shows a rendering of the original landscape. So you can see, they do have a little bit more of like a lush foliage that was originally proposed and approved. This is the other part of the site. And then this is similar to Missy's image. This was the approved site plan where you can see all of the landscape plan, and we have the original plant list that was approved here. Here is the proposed. You can see the plant list is a little bit smaller, and the landscape has been reduced. It is also noted in our staff report that the landscape plan was reviewed by our landscape planner, and it does meet all requirements. So although all of the landscape has been reduced, it still meets all requirements for our land development regulations. Okay, here is the plant list again in case we need to look on it. Okay, these are your findings. So based off of our LDRs and Class 2 modifications for landscaping, you'll need to decide whether or not this request is appropriate. Okay, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I guess we should first ask if there's any rebuttal or comment from either side.
No rebuttal.
No rebuttal.
Okay.
And just for the record, there's no public comment because there's nobody from the public here still.
Do I need to say that, or is you're saying it's sufficient?
Oh, me saying it's sufficient, but if you want to, and
Okay.
if
All
it
right.
comes up again, yeah.
So I guess we go to the board at this point in time. And I will accept any offers to start, but my suggestion might be our official landscape architect, since it does seem to fall into his territory. And I don't know, well, I know John isn't a landscape architect. So, Chris?
Yeah, I'm excited to see a landscape proposal in front of us. I didn't think we looked at landscape too much.
It's the first one I've seen.
Yeah, so this is great. It's unfortunate. It happens a lot on projects where the budget balloons and what gets cut, it's always the landscape because it's one of the last things to go in. So it's not an uncommon thing to happen, which is unfortunate. But looking at the plan, it didn't seem like it was reduced that much, to tell you the truth. I didn't see the original plan in the documents that were shared earlier. Could you put up the original plan? It's
Yes,
this one?
this is the original approved landscape.
It's the last page?
Attachment.
And then,
Like the plan?
oh yeah, and this is the proposed
It
plan.
doesn't have the plan, but it has
But the list.
changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can see that. I think the design, it looks nice. It uses primarily native planting. The sizes of the trees are at 16 feet, which is pretty nice. It seems like it fits the space for the parking and around the architecture as much as it can. There are a lot of existing sable palms that are on the outskirts of the property, which is nice that they're retaining those. So overall, I think the plan looks good, and I would approve this.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I'll weigh in. I mean, I'm for it. Obviously, the most important thing was that the structure was reconstructed. I am disappointed, especially in the loss of the slash pines and the saw palmettos. That traditionally is what this area was, slash pines and saw palmettos. Is there, and those were pretty much totally eliminated. Is there any opportunity on an annual basis to add a small percentage back every year? Because those do, they'll grow, especially the saw palmetto will mushroom out over time.
There is quite a bit of green space left on this property, and as we have the opportunity to do so, we can continue to add the landscaping back that was in the original plan. Mm-hmm. Through our tree planting program, we can put in some smaller, they do a lot of slash pines, we can put in some smaller pines on this piece of property. There's lots of opportunity to do that without interfering with any of the water retention areas.
Have you guys had any discussions maybe with Community Greening or anybody? Because they obviously get grants to plant natives.
Community Greening actually holds the contract for our citywide tree planting program,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be the ones to do the planting on the property.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as securing more material, city would have to pay for it, obviously. They're not going to come up with it. All right. So would that be a line item in the budget, or just as you have funds available, then you would potentially?
The citywide tree planting program is a line item in the budget,
Mm-hmm.
and we populate all of our city properties with trees through that. It's about $325,000 a year in the CIP budget.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
John, do you want to take your first opportunity?
Yeah, sure. I know this location. I guess I'm more of a numbers guy, so I'm wondering, if there's any breakdown of how the costs have ballooned. If there's line items that we can compare, cost before, and then this is why it ballooned. I'm sure it's probably materials, but if there's any other ways, just to kind of have a look at that for audits, I guess, purpose, if that's our purvey or not. It says unforeseen. Obviously COVID probably had something to do with that, but just to kind of checks and balance, if we had a way to kind of compare those, I think that would be us, I guess, doing our job. Yeah, I think with the location of this depot, I think the landscaping is pretty vital. I think John brought that up. Is there any potential possibility down the road to do any fundraising? Anything, that voluntarily could be brought about? I mean, the fact that wellness is going on out there, I think raising the awareness for the local public, and then maybe tying a fundraiser in with that, where maybe the community could participate in filling that gap.
So I'm not going to speak for Public Works, who has to actually implement it, but I think you've both brought up something interesting that I don't think that we discussed, which would be the idea of building out the previous landscape over time, the slash pines and some of the other things, and the other board suggestions. I think when you're considering a motion to direct staff, that we could start with this plan and then augment it over time administratively as the opportunities arise would be great. And I don't think it's something we'd thought of before, because while we have the tree trust fund is sort of spoken for now under that contract, life is long and things happen, and if it gets recharged, then this is an opportunity for Public Works to be able to use some of that money to augment city properties. And because this is historic, then we could continue, or if a fundraising happens through another agency or contracts change. We're always, as we're trying to meet this tree planting goal, we're also looking for opportunities to install them. Now, to be 100% transparent, some of the sizes that come in those small tree grants would not meet the minimum planting criteria on an official landscape. But with Pompey Park, what we did was meet the minimum standard with the 16-foot trees and the larger species, but then augment it with the trees that are smaller. And if that was the board direction to us to move towards the original landscape plan, we could do that kind of over time without having to come back to revisit potentially.
I think just as far as the actual motion, it probably shouldn't be a direction from this board, because you're really just making your decision on this landscape plan. But I think the comments from the board have been well taken from both Missy and Anthea, and moving forward they'll keep that in mind, and I'm sure communicate with also the sustainability chair about that too. And I know honestly he's always looking for places to put trees, so if there's placements that are available, community greening will likely come in and put some trees there.
Also, as development happens throughout the city, there becomes opportunities to relocate trees. This would be an excellent place to relocate trees from other development opportunities.
That's a great idea.
Is there any long-term goals for that open space down in the lower right there, or is that just proposed to be open space for the
For
foreseeable
right
future?
now, it is proposed as green space. There has been some discussion based on what the usage of the former warehouse area is, to retain that as green space in the eventuality it would ever be utilized for any kind of an office that would require deliveries from large trucks or something, because the turnaround radii on the property are not adequate for that kind of activity. So there's a potential that we may have to at some point use that for a turnaround space, but for the current purpose and what the commission has directed us to utilize this space for today, that green space will be retained as green space.
It's marked as lawn area. Is there going to be sod purchased to fill that space?
Yes.
I wonder what the cost is for all that sod, and if that money could be instead used for more native planting material. I'm sure that's many thousands of dollars for that green space. So maybe that's something to consider, is use that money for planting, because lawn, it takes water, fertilizer, maintenance. It's a very cost-heavy item, and looks like a large area. I wonder if that's been considered.
The entire site is under 3 acres, so it's not as large an area as it might look like on the plan set. So, but we can consider that as we move forward and look into it.
Is there irrigation in there now on that open area?
No, not in that open area.
There's a plan, though, for the irrigation.
Kelly, I'm a little concerned that we're talking about items, and you suggested that doesn't go into the motion. Is there another way to do that? Because I think there's some good ideas being here, and I know Missy's a very busy lady. Can we?
Honestly, I think they've appreciated some of the comments, so I have let you guys kind of go a little bit outside of maybe what is the exact purview right now. So, but I do think you really have to focus in on, does this meet the land development regulations, and if it does, it should be approved as their landscape plan. This is kind of the time, I don't normally say it about landscape plans, but this is really you don't want to design from the dais, so you don't want to be changing out certain things. As long as it fits within the land development regulations, then that's your purview to make that decision. So I think, you have a ton of city staff here that's been able to listen to your comments, and I think that it will be passed along. But I do think, it really needs to stick to the motion of whether this is approved and you think it falls within the land development regulations.
As well as the other guidelines, like the Secretary of Interior.
And the design guidelines.
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm
Did you get your answers? Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
So I'm okay with the changes, but you're right. I typically, when we review something like this, I would like to see dollar figures because, for example, taking out the cabbage palms, those are pretty common, right? I don't know if you're getting a lot of bang for your buck taking out 8 of them, but in general, I think if the plan is consistent with the design guidelines for the city of Delray Beach and staff has reviewed it, I'm okay with this.
Peter?
Okay. I am not a landscape expert, but it doesn't seem like a great value. I mean, $50,000 is not a lot of money in the scheme of this budget. And the project has been impacted significantly. It does meet the guidelines, and I would support it, but it's unfortunate that we couldn't be more creative on the front end to fill in this gap. It's just not a big value engineering item. That's all.
Okay. I have a number of questions. As Missy knew I would.
I have to go now.
Pursuant to LDR section 4.6.16a, it says that we should be encouraging the creation of preservation of open space. It says that we should be adding trees, native trees for filtering sound and air, and we here are not doing that. And I think an argument can be made that there is an issue with the compliance to the LDRs. And I'd like to dig into a couple of things. Missy, you mentioned mature trees that are being cut down in other places in the city. And I think that's a great idea. But I do not know of a mechanism that makes that happen.
I'm trying to get the section up on my phone, sorry. Oh, at least I'm having help. This is awesome. Okay, so first of all, I think it's adding trees from what's there today. So I think that it's not fair to say that there's no additional trees going into the site from what exists today. This is an increase. So the way that 4619 works, which is our tree preservation ordinance, right, which is separate. And this is the one where, seek first to work around the existing trees on the site, and depending on where they're physically located, that doesn't always work. It often doesn't always work. So then the second thing the tree preservation ordinance says, and again, this is 4619 in the LDRs, you need some reading later, it says, okay, reuse it on the site. That we have a lot more, I think, with the private developers. They're more likely to do that because they know that the larger trees have value and they improve their address, and we can usually do that. Now, the minute you're moving trees, I want to be 100% honest because we get this a lot. Why aren't you picking up these big trees and moving them around? Trees don't like to be moved around. Trees do not like to be, and you have LAs on your board, so but you're picking them up, you're significantly root pruning, you're significantly pruning the actual part above the ground as well, and then you're moving them to a different place with different light, different soil, and then you're hoping that it's going to thrive. And it's expensive. So all of those things make that relocation strategy a lot more difficult than it sounds. However, our ordinance says reuse it on your site or reuse it somewhere else if you can find another location, and I think to Missy's point, this becomes a location. You may have noticed Sunday Village, they have their own tree nursery of the trees that they picked up that remained, and they are storing them on one of their parcels to reuse somewhere else. So these things do happen. But I've completely forgotten what I was talking about at this point when I went to Sunday. But so yes, this can be a site for accepting relocated trees. I think that I was more actually interested in when the two of you started talking about, adding more overtime, because I think that's doable. This certainly is a receiving site if we have something that we can move.
My point was slightly different.
Okay.
I don't know of a mechanism to do that. That there's nothing in the law that requires, and you can correct me here, I'm
Yes.
sure, a owner to move a tree or pay to move a tree,
Yes.
and the city will not pay for it. And as you point out, the cost can be fairly extensive, but there are 100-year-old trees that are being cut down in Delray.
So 4619 does require, sorry, thank you for reminding me. It does require work around it if you can't move it on site. If you can't do that, and it has a sequence. And if you can't do that, move it off site. So now we have a place we can say, well, we'll take it over here. And then finally, there's a mitigation based on DBH if it's not
Sure.
movable at all, which is the money that is funding community greening right now. That's what those dollars got used for. So yes, there is that. And landscape plans for anything other than single family and duplex go before board. They're either coming here or they're going before the SPRAB. And those landscape plans and their mitigation strategies are assessed at that time in terms of, and usually the problem is there's no place to give the tree, right? Where is the moved tree going to go? But that is absolutely the third tier. The first tier is don't mess with it at all, work around it. The second tier is reuse it on your site. The third tier is reuse it off site. You only get to write the check when you have established through your development approval before the board that acts on it, that the check is the only solution.
Okay. We talked about community greening a little bit. They have a contract to plant 10,000 trees for the city. Am I correct?
I think the city has a goal. I don't know the details.
Yeah, there
of
was
the
an
contract.
established goal of 10,000 trees, and they're working hard toward meeting that goal.
But have you given them the money to do more trees than they've done? Could some more planting of community greening go in that spot?
We have had these conversations with the project manager for the tree planting plan. To date, he does not have plans to put additional trees in this spot. Once the construction is completed and the landscape is done and we're moved into that spot, then we absolutely will continue to encourage him to bring trees to this area, especially as Mr. Miller mentioned, the slash pines and that sort of thing.
The issue, though, those trees tend to be smaller than what we would allow you to use to meet the minimum standard of the code. So this is the minimum standard. We have met it with what is before you today. And with that, then the ability to augment with smaller trees is open, which is, again, something that we're doing at Pompeii.
That was my concern. I mean, the minimum is met. So whether it be a 4-foot slash pine or an 8-foot slash pine, a 4-foot will turn into an 8-foot within a year or so. So anything that goes in the ground now is better than nothing. That's just my point. So thank you for considering that.
And community greening now has their own nursery. I don't know, but it might be an idea to check if they have more that meet the minimum height.
I will continue to work with the project manager for that contract and see if I can encourage him to bring trees to this site.
We also have an in lieu tree fund. Is that applicable here at all?
That is the fund that funds the tree planting program.
I realize that, but would there be more money available there that the city could tap into?
All of the money that's in the tree fund at this point in time is being
Okay.
directed toward that contract.
All right. And will there be any impact on either our national or local registry, historic registry, on this?
As long as it's not affecting a building, I don't believe the landscape, unless it's historic, if this was like a historic landscape, like on the register, I can see how, having the native trees that were in place for the site that was designated for specifically for landscape would apply. But for this site, it's specifically just building related. So I don't think the landscape would affect it.
I was not aware of that. And just one other thought. In terms, we talk about diameter, breast height, and spread, and so forth. Do we have any idea of how much mass has been taken out in coming up with this alternative plan? Because it seems to me that a lot of the big trees, and John kind of alluded to this, are the ones that were reduced the most, like the live oaks. Are you going to, say 10 years from now, is the mass going to be similar to what the original plan proposed?
So the code requires, and by meeting the standards, the code requires a certain amount of shade trees versus palms. You can't do your whole landscape plan
Right.
with palms. You have to use shade species. And so those are the kinds of things that were checked here. Again, this is less landscape than what in the beginning of the project we'd hoped, and that's why there's the minus table, so you can see, how this was sort of, taken to the minimum code, again, with the aspiration that, it can be added to over time, which I think is a great idea. And so because it's compliant, if it wasn't meeting the shade tree coverage or things like that, there would be a waiver you would be also considering to allow the exchange of palms to be higher than what the code requires. And that waiver is not necessary because it meets the shade tree amount. But it's fewer trees than it was before, but the required tree mix of shade versus palm and the other species is there.
Yeah, I was kind of addressing more the idea of mass than palm versus shade, because I think we're adding things like silver buttonwoods, which don't get very large, and live oaks we're taking out. So I'm just wondering if the overall plan is going to meet what our expectations were in terms of mass.
I think it's not going to be nearly what it could have been, or the potential that it had. But if it meets a requirement, it meets the minimum requirement. I think it's unfortunate that we're talking about minimums and we're not doing what we really want.
Yeah, I know.
But I understand Missy's predicament too, where something's got to come out of the budget, and you can't
Believe
pull
me.
concrete blocks out. So
We have value engineered every other possible thing that we can before we started hitting the trees.
Yeah, because that's an industrial area. It used to be, heavily forested and farmed, a lot of farms, and it's no longer there. So I'd like to make a motion if nobody else has anything.
Okay.
Well, I have something that
Chris, go
came
ahead.
to mind. Could we approve this, but for the lawn areas, be under the understanding that maybe that's changed to future native natural area rather than just open lawn area with sod?
I think, again, this is more of like a design issue versus a whether it meets land development regulations. If you have like a reason it doesn't meet the land development regulations or the design guidelines as proposed, then that could be something you put in there. But I think
How about the
Missy
maps?
has noted kind of her understanding of the request, and if that's possible to do, that they would do that. But I think as far as the plan goes, you're turning more into a design, like
Yeah,
the
it's hard.
design of it,
Yeah.
which is understandable. That's your profession, but you just need to stick more to like the land development regulations and the design guidelines and whether it's permitted.
The maximum lawn area requirement, is that on here?
Well, there's probably a minimum open space requirement, but I'm assuming that meets this pretty easily.
But there's also a maximum lawn that you
Oh,
can
maximum
have.
lawn that you can have. I don't know.
Is that different than the impervious area? Or net
Yes.
versus pervious?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because they don't want you to just have all lawn. You can only have so much. I think it's
90 or
80% for
12,890.
single family. So I wonder what it is for here.
There is a minimum with lawn that David Butler had to chat, so he's confirmed that it's
Sounds like from what they're saying that the landscape architect checked the lawn area, but they can't find it specifically on the thing to tell you what
Yeah,
it is,
I
but
would like to
that
see
it has
that
met
percentage.
that.
I'll trust that.
We probably need to move along, but I remember, and I think you were involved with that. I know Anthea was, that we had a workshop here to talk about tiny forests and preservation and so forth. Anthea wrote up a very fine analysis of that. We passed it unanimously. It went up to the city manager and to the city commission, and this particular place was listed as one of those that would be good for a tiny forest. So I don't know if that fits in the discussion or not, but it is something that we have taken a position on as a board and as staff.
Well, I think the good thing is the site's not going anywhere, and I think from the direction and the conversation here, staff has a pretty good idea of what we'd like to see there in the future. So, you know, if the funds aren't there for it right now, then they're not here for it. But I think everybody would love to see more green out there in the spot. So,
Any other discussion?
I'd like to make a motion then. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move we approve Certificate of Appropriateness 2023-242 for the property located at 80 Depot Avenue, individually listed as to the local and national register of historic places, by finding that the request and approval thereof is consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the criteria set forth in the land development regulations.
Second?
Well, second.
Diane, can you take the roll?
Jim Chard,
Yes.
Kristen Finn is absent, John Brewer,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Ivan Heredia,
Yes.
Peter Dwyer,
Yes.
Chris Cabezas.
Yes.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Missy.
Thank you.
I'm pretty positive community greening is going to go out there. Oh, yeah. These are perfect areas for them.
Absolutely.
Well, with the Wellness Center, I think it's a great opportunity to create a great space for whatever.
It's perfect,
whatever
yeah.
the needs may be out there.
Exactly.
And I realize we're only supposed to
Right.
opine on what comes before us, but these are important things. All right. Let's see. Am I lost here? Legislative items?
We have no legislative items.
Okay. And no other comments?
Staff does have some reports and comments.
Okay.
Okay, so there was, I'm sorry, for those of you who are new to the board, Michelle Hoyland is typically your principal who is here, and she's out today. But there was at the May 3rd meeting, this board directed staff to move a message forward supporting the historic designation of the City of Delray Beach Golf Club. And so did want to give you an update on that. We did forward that communication on to the city manager. And September 18th, let me just make sure I'm looking at it, September 18th at 3 o'clock, there's a workshop scheduled that will discuss the future of the golf course, including historic designation, and the memo from this board will be provided as backup for that sort of larger discussion about where that goes. So I know, I just wanted to be sure you knew that your communication had been heard and it was going to be part of that discussion with the golf club.
Can we get a copy of that memo? Or?
I'm sorry I wrote on it, but I will send you one.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes,
And that's at the golf club?
I wrote at it. I wrote it. No, it's a city commission workshop at 3 o'clock, so it'll be here. Yes.
Oh, here? Okay.
I think the commission was already, I think considering and interested in that consideration of designation. But as the Historic Preservation Board, I wanted to be sure you all marked your calendars and were aware of the meeting. It's in the middle of the day, but they are taped. So, and
When
then
you say workshop, that just means getting public comments?
So workshops don't typically include public comment. It's an opportunity in the sunshine for the commission to discuss with city staff or other issues. In this case, I think staff will have a large role, what to do about certain issues that are not ready to be voted on. And so the future of the golf course and sort of the strategies moving forward is the topic of that workshop, and historic designation is part of it at the manager's direction. So I just wanted to be sure you were all aware. And then the other thing that I wanted to make you aware of is the next city commission meeting, which is also the 18th. It's weird because it's on a Monday. There's first reading, so there probably won't be much of a presentation, but there's a series of pretty significant ordinances that this board weighed in on, which are the revisions to Chapter 2, which is the way that we process development. And we're trying to find ways to be more efficient and make sure we're looking at the buildings, the projects holistically. The great thing about this board is you've always done that, because when the properties are designated, everything comes here and it's under one umbrella. That's not the way it's always worked. Planning board's over here giving densities. Rob's trying to understand how it fits on the site. So there are some changes. One of the changes that is in the new ordinance, we're trying to find ways to build in incentives for historic properties, right? It should be easy to own a historic property. So when there's a waiver to the downtown code, it goes before the site plan board, so in this case HPB, for recommendation to commission, and then back down to the board based on the commission's decision for final action. One of the adjustments that is made is that this board would have final action on all waivers. You're already hearing variances instead of sending people over to BOA. So we want to just continue to have this board kind of be the one-stop shop for historic properties to kind of try to move them through faster. So it's a slight adjustment, but I wanted you to be aware that that change is in those ordinances, which saves people time, right? Because they can come here, this board has that, can take final action, and then instead of recommendation, commission down for the site plan.
And
It's a
that's
small
for the
thing,
entire historic district, not just contributing buildings.
Right, it would be for, this board is under the purview of both contributors and non-contributors in districts, so everything would come here. Again, the non-contributors, we want them to be good neighbors to our contributors, so let's try to make it just a little bit easier. It's a small change, but I just wanted to make you aware it's going to expand the authority of the board, and that's included in those ordinances. That's it for me, unless you have questions.
I think last night there was a long discussion, and you presented on something that we decided a couple of weeks ago on turf, artificial turf.
Yes, I'm going to look you all in the eye. I don't think you should have plastic grass in front of contributors. And I'm standing by that. I'm sorry. Ultimately, the commission I think there really was a lot of consideration whether artificial turf really belonged in the city at all, whether it was just for athletic fields, how much, is appropriate. It's a fairly, it's a fairly restrictive ordinance, because it's kind of easier to set a rule and then loosen it than to try to kind of pull it back in once you've kind of move forward. And right now that material has been sort of reacted to through a series of interpretations by different staff people over time. And it's just really time to just put some numbers behind how much you're allowed to have. And if we got the numbers wrong, we find out pretty quickly through the waivers or through the testing. Historic properties are allowed to have artificial turf. Like everywhere else in the city, they are not allowed in the front yard or the swale. And they are allowed only in the rear and side yards, shielded from view. So, behind the fences and the hedges. And also, it was an opportunity for us to adopt criteria related to biodegradability, permeability for drainage, other things like that. That really took some education for staff. We needed to really understand this new material, and we're working with some of our colleagues in neighboring communities that were also like, well, what are you adopting? This is what we've started. We're going to take that from you. Because, things change. So that is there. And HPB, so when you see landscape plans, which you don't see for single family, which I think is the bulk of your agendas, you're seeing the landscape plans as they're related to multifamily and mixed use development. That's when they become required. And so those calculations, like lawn and everything else, would be there and would be assessed for your review.
Any other questions from the board?
I have some, but go ahead.
I do, just a small update. Just wanted to welcome Peter and John to the board, and wanted to let you guys know, of course, wanted to let you guys know that we will be having a legal training. We're trying to work out the scheduling. It'll be with all of the boards, so we're trying to wait it out till PZB, SPRAB, and BOA also get appointed, which should be, I think, next month. So sometime in October, and we'll reach out to you guys and let you know when that's going to happen.
And it's for existing and new this time.
Right.
Not just the new members.
Okay,
we want
good.
everyone.
I think that's good.
Also, I just wanted to add on for new board members, we do have training manuals that you'll get at the next meeting. You'll have a physical actual binder and I believe a digital copy as well too. Yes.
Thank
And
you.
If in the meantime you guys, have any legal questions or any ethical questions or anything, if you guys see anything pop up on agendas where you're like, oh, I'm related to that person or whatever it may be, feel free to reach out to me. You can call the city attorney's office. It's 561-243-7091, and then they'll put you in touch with either me, or if I'm not there, they'll put you in touch with another attorney in the office. Or if you guys have any questions at all, you can also email me too, and it's brandonk@mydelraybeach.com. No problem. That's it for me. So.
All right. Yeah, I got a couple. Any new timeline for the Atlantic Avenue Historic District in terms of readings or?
Yes, so we are working to plan a historic symposium, for lack of a better word, where we would be able to put together just a large, an educational session about what designation really means, the impacts, things like that. We are working to secure speakers, and right now are targeting the end of October at the Field House. We just don't have everything tied up in a bow yet. And so once we have that organized, you'll be the second board to know. But we want to have that sort of larger discussion so people are dealing from a point of being educated, rather than reacting to concerns, that may or may not be valid once they have all the information.
Okay.
So.
And maybe Michelle would be better to answer this. Has staff received any concerns about insurance on historic properties? I mean, obviously the state insurance market is, name your adjective, but I've heard people have asked me, what do I do? So have you heard anything about policies being canceled or,
I live in a 1924 historic home in another city, and I got a really bad bill.
Yeah.
So And some of my neighbors were canceled. So I know it's an issue. I don't, I think West Palm or somebody is looking to have a discussion about it, but we haven't looked into it. Have you had residents reach out to you?
I just know historically, historic homes, the insurances are always an issue. But I don't think we've heard anything recently from any homeowners about insurance issues.
Okay. All right.
Unfortunately.
It's real now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's
Maybe they
real.
were canceled years ago.
It is real.
Two quick questions. Where in the code is there something on legacy trees or historic trees? So I remember seeing an email from the city a while ago asking about, it was either a survey or list your large historic trees. I know of a couple that are on plots of land right now that are up for sale that are easily 100, 120-year-old oaks. And I just wanted to make sure they were noted on the city records somewhere, because I know the city was asking about that. Do you recall of anything?
We have a definition for exceptional specimen tree, which references, among other things, that there is a historic, value to the tree. And there's a series, actually, Jim Chard and I were looking at it yesterday in relation to the fee resolution that went through. I know that there was an inventory that was being done by a previous administration, but I don't know. Oh, exceptional specimen tree.
She needs a raise.
I know, she's great. And the ordinance actually did reduce the caliper size for qualification from 24 inches of diameter breast height down to 18, so more trees would qualify potentially. But we don't, that I'm aware of, we don't have a map of trees that have a historic significance as opposed to simply being a tree that meets the size and
yeah, and it wouldn't necessarily mean, it's very hard to tie a tree to any type of historic significance unless it's in a photograph with somebody famous years ago or something like that. I'm just thinking of a phenomenal specimen that the city would want to protect. So I didn't know if you had an inventory of that. I guess not. So if I see any site plans that do away with the trees, I'll be sure to speak up.
I don't know that it doesn't specifically say like I don't remember the word you said, but the perfect specimen trees. But there is a tree inventory. Honestly, if you Google like City of Delray Beach tree inventory, it actually pulls up a map that you can like click on all of the trees, so it tells you a little bit about the trees, which is pretty neat.
Thank
so
you.
it's like a GIS map that they tracked it.
So, and what would be considered exceptional specimen tree, just since I have it right here. Any tree determined to be of value to the public because of its size, location, age, historic association, ecological value, aesthetics, or other characteristics. Size, last night it was reduced from 24 to 18 inches. Location, proximity to a thoroughfare or highly traveled area. Age, approximate based on size. Historic association, singular. Tree is associated with a notable or local or regional historic event. That does happen in some places. Aesthetics, an exceptional representation of a certain species of tree because of its form or character.
Okay. Yeah, some of these oaks, they're their own ecosystem. They have ferns and orchids and everything else growing off of every limb. So those are the ones, I'm interested in. And then last comment, would you be interested, I'm sure you would, for your September 18th meeting to see some video or have some video of a couple of guys teeing off on the Delray Golf Course in 1931. So we came across some actual film of that.
That's great.
And that's pretty cool. So we can share that with you guys for that presentation. And the interesting thing about it, it shows some of the background, and it's just absolute scrub. There's nothing there. So it's pretty cool to see. So we'll share that with you guys.
Chris, any comments?
Yeah, piggyback on what you were talking about trees. Something that I've noticed in private practice that I think maybe could be improved is that when a house is demoed all the trees on the property are demoed with that house, even though there's no new plan for new construction for the mitigation of those trees. And I always thought that was wrong, that the trees should remain on site. You could demo the house, but all the trees have to remain, because I actually live in front of a double lot that got completely demoed, and now it's just a
22nd and Swinton.
no 17th,
Yeah.
and it's a double lot, and it's just weeds, double lot of weeds.
Federal in second.
Yeah, and I know in Miami you're not allowed to do that. You have to keep most cities you're allowed to. You're not allowed to take the trees down.
You're not allowed here, and usually when that happens, it's not consistent with the permit.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So many lots are completely cleared.
Yeah, and that used to be the practice, right? That to just clear cut the lot and wait for the idea of what redevelopment would have. But 4619 is our tree preservation ordinance, and we've had a strong ordinance. And to be fair, I don't think that it has always been meticulously implemented, but with David Glover as our senior landscape planner. He's relatively new to the position, but he's a longtime city staff, and he is checking every permit that comes in for demolition, and we require that they protect the trees that are not part of the demolition, and that they have to give us that mitigation plan now. So I'd love to tell you we were always doing a great job with that. I can tell you that that implementing our own ordinance that is strong is something that we're highly focused on and have been for the last couple of years. So I'm hoping you'll see less of that. What happens on weekends sometimes, then turns into a code enforcement issue. What's interesting is a vegetation removal permit is not very costly, but if you tear it all down without getting the permission first, then we're able to assess, fees and fines, because it's what is it? They're irreparable. Can't undo it. So we are doing a lot better with that. We have the right staff. They're focused on it. The ordinance is here, and so hopefully you're going to see less of that.
Good. Thank you.
One thing I heard was that the building department can issue a demo on a tree even if there's not a plan or a site plan. So if a developer believes the property is worth more without the tree.
No, that's not true. They're not allowed to just clear cut. You have to do a disposition plan. Even when the CRA just took down an older building on West Atlantic, they had to give us the plan of the trees that were on the site now, the trees that were going to remain, to show us that they weren't removing the trees when they removed the building. I mean, they're a partner organization, so of course they did it the right way, but that is required. You are not allowed to simply cut them to cut them. You have to have a tree mitigation plan that shows what's on the site now, and you're not allowed to clear cut them. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just isn't necessarily happening with a permit in hand. And then, the other thing, though, to be really clear, right, because we're seeing big changes in our single family districts, and I touched on this last night, and I had the presentation going, because this comes up a lot, is the state has made it very clear that any tree that poses, and the last round of edits changed hazard to a risk, right? That if it's cracking your driveway or your foundation, you're allowed to remove it. And we are not allowed to ask for mitigation. Period.
By state law.
State law. It's pre-exempted. This is the rule.
With a letter from an arborist or an LA.
Or with somebody saying that, yeah. And then you can give it to us, I think, after the fact even. So at any rate, there's very little. All right, now what this does not apply to is common areas and HOAs. That's not what this is intended for, and it's only for single family. But again, if you have a single family property and you want to put a pool in your backyard and there is a tree in the way and you have met the minimum landscape standards, you are allowed to cut the tree down and you don't have to mitigate for it because that's a reasonable use of your single-family property. And so when we have the neighborhoods where a one-story, rather modest house is being torn down, and as a new house is coming in that's 2 or 3 stories that is going to every edge of the setback, and then a pool goes in, that's what you're seeing change with the canopy. And there's very little authority that we can do. So this came up with commission last night, and so we were directed to look at what we can do, though, is you have to meet the minimum planting requirements. So if our planting requirements for the single-family neighborhoods are not high enough, that we can increase. Because even, fine, tear your tree down that's ruining your driveway, but now you're short a couple trees, so you need to plant some more. That's where we can try to build that canopy for the next generation, is by raising the standards. So last night at commission, they gave us the direction to start looking at what our single-family requirements are to see if we can just compare them to our neighbors and look at the sizes of our lots in our city and see if they're high enough or not high enough. So the commission is absolutely concerned about the same thing that all of the residents are, that change.
Just to note, City of Miami requires the mitigation, even if you've met your minimum. If you do take out a tree or a palm, you have to mitigate for it no matter what. So just comparing, just to put that out there.
They also made a change to home rule that made it really difficult to challenge. If we get challenged on something where we've overstepped that home rule, the attorney's fees, the collection of those, that was another bill that passed this last round. I'm not explaining it as articulately as the city attorney did last night. So, that might be a risk Miami is willing to take. We're a lot smaller community.
Miami's also passed. I think they've had theirs since, 30 years, I feel like, probably. So
keep in mind,
I think they don't come up against the state preemptions as much as we would trying to pass something new. So.
And then they've taken, and I'm sorry, I don't care. It's an assault on home rule. They pass rules and make them retroactive, which, So once they figure out that, then watch out, Miami. They'll make it retroactive. But at any rate, that's so for single family. It is, look, we're a strong property rights state. We're in a strong property rights country. All of that's very important to us. It's just gotten to the point, where I think the best strategy for greening our neighborhoods is to look at those minimum standards, because you can take out what you can take out, but we can actually then add in a higher requirement. And that's the strategy that staff, I think, is, we've brought forward and commission embraced yesterday. So we're going to try to go that way with it. And those changes will come to you as a recommendatory board before they go to PZB and then on to commission for consideration. I'm not promising a timeline, but, things we're living out of our inboxes right now, but I promise it is something that we all care about as well. So,
anything else?
I did send you guys the link to the inventory too.
Awesome.
If you'd like.
Thank you.
No problem.
I think that just measures canopy, though. I don't think it gives scale of.
No, it actually, if you click on any of the trees, you can actually see what type of tree it is, the DBH,
Really?
the height.
Wow.
Yep, it's very cool.
Good.
So check it out.
I'll see if those are on there, the ones I was looking at. That's great.
John? Can I entertain a motion to close if there are no other discussions?
I just would like to remind the board that our next meeting is October 4th. Please mark your calendars. In any event that you know in advance you won't be joining, can you please let Diane and our principal planner, Michelle Whelan, know in advance? Thank you. That's all we have.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, I get to use this.
All right.
Yeah.
All
Good
right.
job, Chair.
Good job.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.